Hello. Hello, I'm Kate Wolf, and I've come here today to talk to you about the virtues of dry shampoo. Just joking, but isn't it good? Doesn't it look like I washed my hair? I didn't, but don't tell. What I'm really here to talk about is how we answer that question. So, what do you do? And actually take a moment to notice how your body physically responds when I ask you so. What do you do? Is there a tight fist of panic in your stomach? Is there a clench inside your throat? Are you about to suddenly waffle for 20 minutes? Or maybe you have your very well prepared, well crafted 60-second line elevator pitch that describes what you do, who for, and what you help them avoid. But whenever you share it, you feel inside that it lands boom, dead, and people thank you and move on to the next person. No further questions of, oh, that's interesting, tell me more, which is what we want, right? That's the ideal response to having introduced ourselves and introduced ourselves well in response to the question, so what do you do? Is not in scenario A, having waffled for 20 minutes, watching the eyes of our audience glaze over as they start wondering about what they're going to have for dinner and why is this person still talking? Or in scenario B, having your well-crafted sentence that flops like a dead fish and does not ignite curiosity or engender further questioning to allow the magic of a conversation to happen between two humans in a natural, easeful way where if there's resonance, if there's interest, if perhaps this person you're speaking to is an ideal client or maybe knows someone who would be an ideal client of yours, then that connection can be found, right? So that's what we want the response to our response to the question of, so tell me what you do to create is intrigue, further interest, another question. Ooh, tell me what you mean by this bit of this sounds fascinating. Some version of tell me more, which won't happen if A scenario, we've spoken for too long, or B, and like told our entire life story, right? Like a 7-year-old. And then, just don't do that. Or scenario A, we're ready, we're prepared, nobody cares. What I suggest that you do instead is scenario C or 3, which is you offer up your story by it. That's what I call your story by it. So it's a way of very cleverly dropping in some of your credentials, right? Some of your gravitas, some of your absolute credibility and backing and reason for being the person doing what you're doing, but without sounding, maybe like you got something up your ass. And here's the little nuance of that. I am such a huge contender for you owning your gifts, owning how powerful they are, how needed they are, how valuable they are. So this isn't about positioning yourself as less than you are, but it is about doing it in a way, bringing forth some of your magic and some of your credentials with an awareness of how it lands in your listener and an awareness of the culture that we're in. And yes, I will be the first person with 2 hands up saying how much I would love to live in a culture where when one person celebrates themselves and claims how absolutely amazing they are, the only response that's in the room is, "Whoa, go you." But we don't live in that culture, sadly. Transforming that is absolutely part of the mission I'm on and my clients are on. And we're not yet there. So if we introduce ourselves with our slide and our clicker of our credentials, and we share them with a plum, what's more likely that's going to happen as a response in the audience, in the listeners? Oh, well, doesn't she think she's great? Which is not really what we're going for. So I taught all about this crafting of a story bio in a 3-hour workshop yesterday with my mesmerized clients. So it's in-depth work. And I want to share some top level tips with you here today. And if you would like access to the 3-hour in-depth training, send me Megan Sharkey or Lauren Burles on my team a message, and we will have a chat about how you can get access to that. So what's really important on a top level version of the story bio is that you find your right balance of credibility and relatability. And this is going to depend on 2 things. It's going to depend on you and your ideal client. So if you know about yourself that you come across as incredibly credible, you have a list longer than your arm of certificates, trainings, really impressive positions that you have performed at work in different roles. And maybe you find people are sometimes almost a little wary of you, maybe even a little scared, at the very least, just very impressed by you, admire you, maybe put you on a pedestal. Then what you need to do is raise relatability. Because while, of course, if we're paying someone for their services, we want to respect them, we want to trust their knowledge, we also need to feel safe with them, especially if the work you do is healing in some way, because that requires vulnerability from your client. It requires them to know inside, if I'm sat with this person in one-to-one coaching or in a group coaching scenario, or however you do your work, they need to know I can be vulnerable with them. I can reveal things maybe I haven't revealed before. They might not, depending on where your ideal client is on their journey, they might not be thinking these things consciously, but unconsciously they absolutely are looking for someone that they can trust with the unsaid. Because unconsciously, we all know we can't break through to new levels of self-expression if we're still holding on to shame and to beliefs that certain things about us are wrong. So we're looking for people that we can reveal those things with in a safe environment. And if you are someone who people put on a pedestal, they might not want to bring their vulnerability to you. They might think, well, I want her to admire me, right? So I'm going to bring my best self. When really maybe what they need to do is feel safe enough to show you their worst self. So if it's important for you to be creating safe spaces for healing, and you know yourself to be very credible, you may need to raise your relatable in how you talk about yourself. You may need to reveal some of your vulnerability. And that can be done beautifully through story. Now, you may be on the other side. You may know yourself to be very relatable. So you'll know that you are relatable, that you're perceived as friendly and approachable. Why? Because people approach you, right? People come up to you and they share themselves with you and they share their vulnerability easily, naturally with you. You get on a sales call and someone tells you their whole life story. You sit at a bus stop and a stranger wants to tell you about their innermost fears or desires. You're naturally, if that's the kind of outward response you're creating in life, then you're naturally approachable, friendly, relatable. However, if you're having all these people, strangers, people at networking events, friends, maybe your mum, maybe your children, maybe people's cousin's third dog, call you up and want your listening ear, want your support and your care, but you're not making the kind of money you want by using your gifts inside your business, you, my friend, need to up your credibility. Because I know you have it, because I've not met any wonderful, magical person who doesn't. Often they can't yet see it, right? For them, it's just normal. These are just things I've done in my life. But if you took some time and you wrote them out, and then you shared them, they would be incredibly impressive. So have a think about where you are on this naturally credible or naturally relatable scale, and which one do you need to bring in more of. So I'm just going to pop into Facebook and have a little look. So, are we going? Are we live? Think so. I think it's live. Okay. But I don't see myself moving. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hit mute and then see if this is working. Hope so. All right, I'm going to keep going because what else is there to do? So, other high-level tips from the Story Bio training, which you, if you want to go into more depth on, send myself a private message, Megan Sharkey or Lauren Bowles, and we will let you know how you can have access to. The second piece, so this is, the relatability and the credibility and the relatability piece is around the tone of voice, right? Whether you bring in more pieces of credibility, roles you've played or held, your certificates, your trainings, maybe some name dropping if relevant and feels, on brand for you, or relatability, right? Being open about yourself, being vulnerable, creating a more approachable energy field around yourself. So this is in the kind of underlying how of how you bring forth your story bio. And then we have the pieces of the story bio. And there are three main pieces. And one is credibility itself. So it literally is sharing impressive things about yourself. However, it's not done by listing them in a very boring way. The second piece that it's important to land in your story bio is the problem that you help solve. And the third piece is the transformation that you help create. Now, pieces two and three aren't they're not new. I haven't reinvented the wheel here. They are absolutely the things that everyone tells you whenever you're writing a story bio. They wouldn't call it a story bio, a bio that you need to include, right? Or when someone is asking you the question, so what do you do, that you would need to include problem and solution or transformation if your work is transformational. However, the piece where it becomes different, unique, interesting is when we put it into story form. So I'm going to share with you my story bio so you can get an idea of what I'm talking about. Now, this story bio I've literally used 4 times in the last couple of days. It is a piece of work to get written, to get crafted, and it's so worth its weight in gold. Because once you have it, you use it again and again and again and again and again. You can use it to introduce yourself at networking events, which was 3 of the times I used it in the last couple of days. And it comes across, as you're here in a moment, in a very natural conversational way. So you get to clearly describe what you do and land some of how you came to be doing what you're doing. But you don't sound like you're listing out credentials in a networking event, which would come across as very odd indeed. Not the good kind of weird, the kind that we love. And you can use it to introduce yourself in Facebook Lives. You can use it to introduce yourself on webinars. You might want to go a little bit more in depth there and make sure it links to the point you're making in the pieces you're teaching, right? That's when your messaging starts to become much more elevated, when everything that you're saying has a purpose. You're introducing your way in story form that begins to share some of your unique perspectives and your unique brand essence. So you're not just talking about yourself for 20 minutes, which is like, oh my God, death by story on webinars, right? So common. But your audience are transfixed because you're already sharing, you're already teaching, you're already giving value through story. You can also use it in the third person. So you just flip it, put it in the third person, and give it to whoever you're being interviewed by, whether it's for a podcast or a joint Facebook Live, a training inside someone else's group. You give it to someone else, and then you get to be introduced in a really powerful and effective way, instead of, again, that like death by bio bit that happens at the beginning of many trainings when the person introducing is like reading from a script and it's awful. This is a way to make sure that doesn't happen, and that you're actually introduced in a way that positions you as a leader, so that then you get to step forward, share what you're planning on sharing with an audience already excited about hearing from you because of how you've been introduced. How you're introduced is so important. So important. It sets the scene for everything you're about to say. So yes, creating your story bio is a piece of work. Growing your business requires work. Newsflash. But it's really, really, really worth it. The benefits are cumulative. So I'm going to take a sip of water. I'm going to magically vanish. And then I'm going to come back and introduce myself. Ta-da! So for many years, I walked a twofold path. On the one hand, I was immersed in the world of creativity. I co-founded and was artistic director of a theatre company. I wrote 3 plays and brought them all the way through to performance. I performed at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival and received 5 stars in The Guardian. Thank you, Louis de Bernier. Such fun days. And on the other hand, I was simultaneously immersed in the world of healing, of energy, of spirituality. I trained and worked as a yoga teacher in flow, yin, restorative. I worked as an intuitive energy healer, and I explored any kind of healing that I could find. Tantra, Taoism, theta, rebirthing, reflexology, shamanic reflexology, just plain shamanism, diving into the sacred feminine, embodiment, the weirder, the better. You name it, I've probably tried it. And what I got to experience as being simultaneously immersed in these 2 worlds is that really they are one world. And that the most healing thing we can do is express who we really are, because nothing about who you are is wrong. And what I also noticed being part of this world of healing, spirituality, personal growth, doing things in a very non-conventional way, is that many of these healers, teachers, coaches, guides, whatever you use to call your world-changing work, right? They weren't particularly good at the whole communicating their value part, asking for the sale part, making money from their magic part. And what I realized was that I could take my years of experience on stages, connecting with thousands of people, learning about presence, play, effective communication to move an audience to their feet, to feel, to take action, to support the magical healers of the world, to communicate their value, connect with their audiences, and move their potential clients into action. So what I now do is I support these wonderfully sensitive, accidental business owners to communicate their value and make money with their magic. So, should we deconstruct that a little bit? So I listed out credentials, right? I name dropped The Guardian. I name dropped Louis de Bernier. I don't always use his name. It depends a bit on whether I think the audience will know who he is or not. Author of Capturing Credits Mandolin. Bonus points if you got that. And I, listed out that I've written 3 plays, brought them all the way through to production. Why do I mention that? I mention that because I help business owners with their creative communication and storytelling. And so it's proof, right? It's proof that I know how to craft. And this really is a gap that my unique skills fill, because there are a lot of marketing coaches, business coaches out there who know how to, who understand that storytelling is good for business on a mental level. But not many who spent a decade treading the boards and actually understand storytelling. The essence of storytelling, the heart of storytelling, the craft of storytelling. So this is a really important piece from my background that presences me as the person to be doing what I'm doing here today, along with my experience and my background in the healing realms. And there are a couple of things I deliberately sort of point to when I'm talking about the spiritual experiences I've had. And I literally say, the weirder the better, right? I don't like land it as a very important point. It's a flippant thing, it's a throwaway, but it's really important. And that's because something I know about my ideal client is either they have this deep down fear that what they dream of bringing into reality, of making really good money with, is not possible. And most people who come to work with me come off the back of having had at least one, if not multiple, experiences of working with a coach, a business coach, who didn't really get it, right? Didn't get the depth of the work that they want to do. So what I'm doing here is I'm signaling to my ideal clients, your work can't be too weird for me. I'm not going to try and make you tidy it up, make it palatable, or make it less deep than we know it is. I want your weird depths. Give me your weird depths, right? I'm a safe space for that. That's what I'm signaling here. I also know I attract clients who sometimes keep that part of themselves, the spiritual, magical, mystical part, in a drawer in their desk, right? Maybe they're working as a lawyer, an actuary. I have so many lawyer clients, and they keep their tarot cards in their desk. You know, that kind of an example. So that's also this, like the weirder the better, all the spiritual things. It serves so many purposes, right? It's part of my credentials. It also signals to the people who have this deep down fear that their weird dreams might never come to fruition. That's like the deepest fear of my ideal client. So I reference it in my story bio. And I'm also calling out to that segment of my ideal client who still keeps that part of herself in a drawer. And I'm saying, I'm a safe space for that, right? Can't be too weird. So same thing, just slightly different way that it comes out in my ideal client. And I'm also bringing in, this is like a bone. This is the third tip, okay? Third tip, to make it a really elevated way to introduce yourself. So the first one, remembering correct levels of what? Credibility and relatability. 2, the 3 components it needs are the list of credentials shared in story form, right? I did not say, and I wrote 3 plays and brought them all the way through to production, and I received 5 stars in The Guardian, right? Don't do that. I know you won't. So components it needs are list of credentials told in story form, the problem you solve, and the transformation you offer. And then the third tip for today, and remember that if you would like to be guided through this process in the Story Bio training, private message myself, Megan Sharkey, or Lauren Vales on Team Wolf, and we'll let you know how you can have access to it. The third tip for today to really elevate your story bio is to bring in something that you really believe, a really core belief. Not if you've done work in core wounding, not your core wounding belief, but almost the inverse of that, like your core empowered belief. about the world. And mine, and those keen listeners among you will have heard it because I said it in the story. Mine is nothing about who you are is wrong. Now, it's important for me and my ideal client that I bring that forward because of this underlying fear that is common in all of my clients. This fear of being seen, of being found out, of being rejected, of being ridiculed. And so that's their main objection to working with me, right? Obviously, there are the surface level objections like, oh, I don't have the money, or I don't have the time, which mostly, not saying all the time, but mostly are not the real reason. More often than not, the real reason is it's terrifying. Terrifying. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I was terrified for years. Years and years and years. The very first time I did a Facebook Live, I sat with my finger frozen over the go live button for 20 minutes. Just like this. Like in fear, in the freeze response. I know how scary it is, and I know how scared a lot of people find the idea of actually achieving their dreams is, right? And a part of them knows if they step into a container with me and they do the work, they're going to become much more visible and they're going to become much more successful. And success is going to make them more visible. And I'm going to require them to become even more visible. And that's going to make them even more successful. And then that's going to make them even... Do you see the problem? Right? So fear. It's this wonderful paradox where the main desire is also the main objection. I wonder if that's true for your clients. So the main desire to be seen, right, with your gifts, fully out there, fully self-expressed, and hot on the tail of that, a whole lot of fear. And so that's why, in one sentence, one line really, I drop in a little pipette drop of gracefully overcoming that objection. If they're really listening, and if I do it well, it lands. Because nothing about who you are is wrong. What does that mean, right? It means there's nothing to be found out. There's nothing to be found out about you that is not lovable. So, in your story bio, when you're sharing your list of credentials through Storyform, you're segueing gracefully into therefore, you might want to find like a little segue sentence, like, and then I realized, that's what I use. It's very simple. You don't need to necessarily get creative there. I say, and what I realized as a result of being immersed in these two worlds is these wonderful healers, teachers, therapists, guides, and then I look right at you, because I'm talking about them, but really I'm talking to you. And then I look and I go, whatever word you use to describe your healing work in this world, right? As if it's like a accidental throwaway, but again, very important point. And then I come back and I say, what I realized is they weren't particularly good, and I kind of make it a joke because really I'm talking about you again, so I don't want to be mean, right? I don't want to make it your fault. I don't want to be critical, right? So not particularly good at communicating their value, right? So that's how I do it. That's on brand for me, a little bit playful, a little bit pokey, with love, always pokey with love. But on a very, very simple level, All I'm saying is, and what I realized from this experience is this, and that's why I now do this. Right? So very, very simple structure. So do you remember at the beginning, I was talking about these two different, equally awful ways to introduce yourself. One is just rambling for 20 minutes, having got to the end, told 7 different stories, none of which are really connected. Maybe they're kind of connected in your head, but you haven't actually gracefully made that link or connections for your audience, and their eyes are glazed over. And in that scenario, what you need to do, okay, is what you need to go back in time, stop about 17 minutes earlier, and just shut your mouth, okay, and then wait to be asked a question. So that's what you do in that scenario. You just go back in time, okay. In the second scenario, there's this well-crafted sentence that says, I help blah, 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 do without And everyone's like, yada, yada, yada. You've been to 15 marketing workshops. That's nice for you. I'm very bored. So this story bio is a way to bring in some of this story part of your life, right? And especially if you're very creative, you're like, I don't want to do the boring 1-minute elevator pitch. I'm just going to tune in the moment and speak from my heart. 20 minutes later. So this is a way to bring in some of that beautiful magic of creativity, being present in the moment, spontaneity, and yes, speaking from your heart with some structure, so that you have your points, you know you're going to land. So your audience can stay with you. So your audience can actually feel the message from your heart. So it was fun doing this standing up. I think I might do them standing up more often. I like being able to move and dance. I am going to pop back into Facebook. I'm going to see if you have any questions for me. Oh, it's shut itself down. Okay. It's whirring. It's whirring. All right. Does anybody have any questions about the story bio? Not as far as I can see, unless Facebook is being weird, which it may well be doing. So I'll pop in after this video is finished and up and answer any questions that you have for me. And again, if you'd like to be able to introduce yourself with a story bio versus rambling inarticulately for 20 minutes or giving the dead statement, give myself, Megan Sharkey or Lauren Bells a message, and we'll let you know how you can get access to that 3-hour in-depth and guided training on writing your story bio. All right, lots and lots of love for now. Go be amazing.